Yes, we can see it. Is it possible for...
technically on your computer, you're on the phone.
Okay, cool.
Right.
All right.
I can see it. But is it possible for us to get a copy of the slides?
So they will be on SharePoint on the onboarding site tomorrow, Gary promised.
Okay, great.
Yeah, all the sessions are being recorded.
That's scary. So again, the main purpose was so people would have this slide deck as a resource to know where things are. And then the secondary purpose is to see how it all sort of fits together. So you're right, it would be kind of silly to say, hey, you've got this resource, this slide deck, and not give it to you. But yeah, that will be made available. All right, so yesterday we were in QA. We went through QA. Today we're in BMS. Part of BMS is provider enrollment and management. And so with provider, so some of the things for a provider is, are they certified? Have they met all their credentialing requirements? And in the last few years, CMS has come out with an idea of re-credentialing high-risk providers. So one of the things we've asked the vendor for is to be able to configure what the configuration is and the frequency of it. Typically, high risk are like personal care attendants, DME, durable medical equipment suppliers are typically considered high risk. So there just needs to be able to have that flexibility. And then, as you can see, the CSFs are up. So it's about making sure that there's a reasonable network. My stepdaughter is on Medicaid in Idaho. They gave her a list of dentists that would take Medicaid, and we went through 12. She's hearing impaired, so we did this on her behalf. We went through 12 before we actually found someone that was on the list that really was still taking Medicaid clients. So, and that's not unique to Idaho. It's probably not unique to New Mexico. But with the data that will be available in the future, one of the things we've asked for is an indicator on the provider file as to whether they are or are not taking new clients, so that if they've met their capacity, you don't keep having people call. For processing transactions, again, how a provider gets enrolled impacts whether the claim processes correctly or not. 26, when it talks about traditional and non-traditional, people typically think of traditional as medical providers, doctors, lab, radiology, hospital, that type of thing. Non-traditional being more for the waiver programs like personal care attendants. If I can't have a disability that prevents me from being able to accomplish my ADL's activities of daily living, like cook for myself, maybe I need assistance getting in and out of bed, then a personal care attendant can be authorized to do those services. And that's typically what we mean by non-traditional. We may also, however, mean maybe I need to have a ramp built at my home. Home Depot for materials is a non-traditional provider. The person who actually does the building would be a non-traditional provider.
I thought we also allowed medicine men in New Mexico too.
You probably do. The one that surprised me in Washington was doulas. There are, and each state has their own things that they accept. Some allow massage therapists, some don't. It just depends upon the state. But traditional, non-traditional, traditional also, you will hear when you're talking about HIPAA and being HIPAA compliant, that there are the NPI providers, typical providers that have to have certain sets of taxonomies, and then there are the atypical providers that don't get an NPI, personal care attendants, Home Depot. So we've asked the vendor to be able to accommodate those situations as well. Okay? Bing! Is that better than Bing? See, if you had kids, you'd know all of these cute things. Okay, so electronic health records. So on the other slides that we talked about for the, when I said, okay, we're shifting gears, we're going to the critical success factors. For electronic health records, there are no critical success factors. They're not in the CMS checklist at all. However, we still have to meet the CMS expectations, which are found at regulations, guidance, legislation, EHR, and blah, 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 at that website. And basically it is that you have to have a certified electronic health record system. You have to meet meaningful use and attest to it. And why does it matter? Because if I'm a provider and I do that, I get extra money. Okay? Any questions on it? Cool?
So Sherry, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You said that sunsetted in possibly 2019.
I think it's 2019. So it was 3 years for hospitals, 6 years for non-hospitals, physicians. And there was a period of time where you could start. And if you started by 2014, then it goes to 2020. So it depends upon when you started as to when the program actually finishes.
I think the program from an administrative side probably carries through 2021 because of the time frame for attestation.
Yeah, it might be 2021. But, and so again, I'm not the authority on anything.
Yeah, no.
But I'm trying to give people resources to go find out from the actual authority. And the other thing that's kind of interesting with EHR is I might get EHR payments for Medicare. If I'm getting them for Medicare, I can't also get them for Medicaid. If I'm getting them in Texas, I can't also get them in New Mexico. So there's interfaces with CMS to say who's getting what where. And so we have to make sure that we account for that. Okay? Jackie, if you might, change the slide, please. Thank you.
That's perfect.
Is that better? All right. PBM, Pharmacy Benefit Management. PBM, point of sale. Basically, when I go to Walgreens and give them my prescription, they type some stuff in, it goes up, it comes back and says, no, Sherry can't have that because she just had that prescription filled yesterday. She does not need that many oxycodone.
Now we know.
They don't know you.
Now we know, John.
So interesting, back when I did work comp in Idaho, I, just on the sidebar, I was covering for another examiner who had Eastern Idaho, and I was looking at the file, I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. This woman was getting prescribed 30 oxycodone a day. And I'm like, really, you're paying for that? And when she came back, she's like, well, the doctor's prescribing it. Oh, no, that don't make it right. So with our new functionality that we intend to bring in with all the data being in a specific location, we should be able to know more about what's going on with somebody. Provider claims are adjudicated correctly. So kind of yesterday I said that a PBM is like an entire claim system. Drug utilization review, so they do their own prior auth. The point of sale that says, yep, you can have this, or no, you can't have this, or I have to have an authorization, or whatever it says. The actual transaction that results in payment of the claim. So in the medical world, in the physician world, you get a HCPA 1500 or a CMS 1500 from the doctor's office visit. For drugs, you get an NCPDP. Please don't ask me what it stands for. I can't remember. National Code for Prescription something. Anyway, so that transaction is a little bit different. What that means, though, is when we get that data dumped into the data warehouse, is we have to account for those different structures from those different places. Complies with federal policies, absolutely. So on CSS 5, third-party coverage, including Part D Medicare. So like I mentioned yesterday, there's a concept of recovery, and there's a concept of cost avoidance. So as I understand it, for New Mexico, the state does not do recovery on drugs that's discovered after the fact, primarily because it's not cost effective. But also, if I do that recovery, then it preempts me from being able to do that drug rebate. So it was a financial decision. Doesn't mean you couldn't do recovery, and we have asked the vendor to be able to, should the state choose to do that in the future, depending upon what we learn from the data. But at this point, they don't. Pharmacy claims, rebate. Okay, so back to rebate. Like I mentioned yesterday, and I think the law was in '74, but basically CMS entered into an agreement with all the labelers and manufacturers for Medicare and Medicaid claims that says you get paid what you get paid at the time of the sale, but then quarterly I'm going to invoice you, and each month or each quarter a file comes out and says what's the rebate amount for this particular drug. Okay? Jackie, would you mind to change the slide, please?
Not at all, Sharon.
Okay. Nice picture, right? You are actually filling it, processing the payment for it, and drug rebate. Okay, so benefit plan management, and we touched briefly on this yesterday, but again, benefit plan management is about what services does someone get who has this benefit plan. You have your own insurance, I'm assuming. Most people do, right? It's a similar concept. What does my insurance cover? Medicaid, for lack of a better term, is another form of insurance. Have different programs that cover different things, have different benefit plans. What this does for us, as far as CMS is concerned, is we can make sure that people are getting the right services for their category of aid or for what their situation is. Number two, claims payment is better, right? So right now there is Jackson class members, and there's not too many of them, fortunately, but basically there was a lawsuit, and these Jackson class folks have to be treated different. There are, in the legacy system, there are no indicators necessarily that you can use to process a claim. There's nothing that says, oh, they go through these steps. So there basically is just a report with this list of people, and when somebody needs to do a waiver thing on them, they have to go check the Jackson list. When they need to process a claim, they have to check the Jackson list. So it's messy. It is not uncommon to New Mexico, right? Other states I've worked in, they have a subset of people that get handled a different way for whatever reason. But benefit service plans allows you to be able to do that. If you need to have different benefits for the Jackson folks, you just set up a benefit plan. That is that particular benefit plan. What we've asked for in the benefit plan is the ability to group things. So let's say everybody in the state that gets Medicaid, regardless of what their category of aid is, gets office visits, a 99111 through a 99115. Those are all covered. There's no reason to list that in every benefit service plan or package. Rather, you create a group. So here's a group of things. Physician visits, it's this one through this one, except for that one. So we ask for the ability to be able to include and exclude into those groups, to create subgroups that say, if I change this top group, it changes everything in the subgroups. Let's see. Manage the reference data for claims processing, claims are processed and tracked. So really that's all VSPs are about. It's a way to say what somebody can or cannot have. Okay? If you wouldn't mind. New and exciting features of VMS, provider management. Right now, all of the various programs have their own provider enrollment solution. In the future, anybody that's paid, anybody that's performing services, even if they're not being paid by Medicaid, so DOH providers, aging providers, would still enroll through provider management. Another thing that we've said is all of those people that that are part of an MCO or want to be part of an MCO, providers, they have to apply to be Medicaid eligible first, and then go to the MCO for the contracting. So we will know all of the providers who are performing services. EPSDT, early periodic screening and diagnostic and treatment. You'll hear, if you're fortunate, talk about the periodicity table. Basically, this is just a table that says well baby visits for 6 weeks, at 12 to 18 months, at 2.5 to 4. My daughter, so my son was getting his kindergarten shots. My daughter was 3.5. She was mad because she couldn't get her shots yet. So the day she turned 4, she went to get her shots because that's what she wanted for her birthday. That's the periodicity table, right? And a table can be not just about well baby visits and immunization. Anything that the state wants to start paying, provided they get CMS's approval, as a PSDT service can be billed. In Washington, like I think I mentioned yesterday, they also do women's health care stuff, mammograms, PAPs, et cetera.
We're required to put the children's table on our Medicaid notices.
Yes, so,
I forgot what legislation that was. I don't even know if our department, I think it's in conjunction.
yes, so the way Washington does it is, they send out a letter that says, hey, your kid's eligible for this. One of the and that's what Washington did. One of the enhancements we did in Washington was we actually looked to see if they'd had that service before we sent the letter. Because the feedback we got from parents was, yes, I know, I took them in. For God's sake, quit sending me this stuff. Or I took them in before, and you paid for it, you should know. So that's the kind of thing that could be done with increased knowledge with the new system. BMS, benefit management across the enterprise. One of the things that we will have to look at is if, let's say it's physical therapy, and let's say Medicaid pays for 48 visits in a year. But if I'm on a waiver program, I could be authorized for an additional 30 visits, so I get 78 total. How do we make sure that that gets managed across the system? And what is the hierarchy for who pays first? Hierarchy for who pays first typically is which one's going to get reimbursed best. There were certain instances, though, in Utah where because the reimbursement rate for Medicaid was less than what they'd agreed to with a provider, that they processed part of it under Medicaid to get this benefit, and then they processed the additional dollar amount under the waiver program. Very complicated. Took hours to come up with how we make that happen. But that's things that can be done with the new and improved system. Automated processes, we're going to beat this one to death. Talking with the waiver folks, we talked about it just a few minutes ago at our stand-up meeting. With the waiver process, so let's say I'm 11-15, I'm aged and or disabled. So I reach out to aging. They look at me and they go, yeah, I think you qualify. So then they send it over to Community Benefits Program. And when I say send, I don't mean electronic. It's not a thing, we've got a new person, here's an alert, do something with it. It is, I send an email, or I call, or I send it on paper. And so then the CBS folks, or CBP folks, they send out a packet. And it's this form and this welcome letter and blah, blah, blah. And they put that together manually. But before they send it out, they look in multiple different systems to try and find the most current address so they don't send it to the wrong address and have it. That is just the second step. Already in 2 steps, you have 2 manual processes that are wrought with error and a waste of time and energy.
And meanwhile, the client is calling the IMV office because they handle eligibility, and all that other paperwork hasn't been submitted and sent to them yet, so there's no trigger
so,
initiating them to take action, so the client doesn't know who to call.
So we found that it is not uncommon for people to be on the waiting list for 10 years. Correct. Once they get to the top of the waiting list, assuming they're still alive, then it can take up to 180 days to get them through the process if it goes smoothly, if everything is there. That's crazy. So for my mom in Idaho, she lived at home, she did okay, family helped take care of her, but she did have to go to a facility when she fell and broke her hip. So I applied for Medicaid on her behalf. And I waited. I'm good, right? I took all the paperwork in, and I got a receipt for it. Lesson learned. So I took everything in, and I waited, and I waited, and I waited, and I got a letter on her behalf that said they had received her application. They needed more information. Okay, so I go in to the office, because that's the way I am, and I've got this stack of stuff. And the guy says, how can I help you? And I'm like, okay, well, got this letter. I show him the letter. It says it needs more information. And here's what I have. And blah, blah, blah. He's like, you're going to have to take a seat. Okay, can you tell me why? And the attitude went up, which meant my attitude went up. And basically, he was too busy to talk to me right now. Now, this is after I've waited for 23 minutes, because I checked, in the office in Idaho to get my number to come up on the board to be told you have to sit down. That is not acceptable. It just isn't. And so finally, I got across to him by me being nicer than he was, that here was the paperwork that he needed, and let me help you to get your job done by you taking this in. He finally agreed to scan it. I left. I waited. Being proactive, I called. So I get the call, oh, well, this department, that's long-term services, and they have to do blah, blah, blah. Here's their number. Okay. So I call long-term services, and I get, oh, well, well, we're doing this part, but the financial part is done by those. I just talked to them. They said they didn't need it. Well, in here it says they do. So I call them back. And it was just this horrendous runaround. And it is not because anyone didn't want to do their job. It is not that at all. It is because people are working with the systems that they have. We have got to, I'm going to try and stay off my soapbox, but we have got to automate things to make things better for the customers, to make things better for the state workers. Okay, if you wouldn't mind. Okay, thank you. Financial services. I should be able to get through this really quick. Financial services is about, actually, let's stop, because this starts in the next RFP. Thank you. We'll do financial services tomorrow. Any questions on anything thus far? Mark?
Is there a cheat sheet?
Is there a cheat sheet? You know, I was looking at some old stuff from CNSI the other day, looking for some stuff around social services. And I happened upon a Medicaid 101 I put together a lifetime ago, and I was giggling at it because I know so much more now. Really, your cheat sheet is all the people that are doing this work. I know what I know from having done multiple different projects, but I don't know the day-to-day nitty-gritty. And that's where we're going to have to get, is with the subject matter experts that know this stuff. So there are two things you'll learn. First thing they're going to want to talk about are the pain points. Got to fix the pain points. Second thing you're going to learn about is the thing that they do most common. The third thing that you're not going to find out until we stumble over it is those things that have to be done, but they're not terribly difficult. And so I forget about that work that I do. Every week I have to fill out what did I do this week. I have to go back and look at my calendar. Jackie this morning had to look. What am I doing today? What meetings do I have? The work that we do, we just do without even registering it. It is work that has to be done. And that's where we may, going down the road, hit gaps if we don't dig in deep enough to get past what's the PIA stuff, what is the most common stuff, to what is the common stuff that's really easy that people do without even thinking about. Okay?
Awesome. Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you, everybody. See you tomorrow, same bad time, same bad time. Oh, anybody on the phone have questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Jackie?
Thank you. Very useful. Very useful.
I'm sorry?
We said thank you. Very useful.
Okay, thank you. Have a great day. Dana. Yeah.